Okay, we're going to start a little early because we asked for an hour and a half, and they said they only do hour programs. And
there are 22 cards that we're planning on going over if we possibly can, and this right here is the content from the book we're writing on just the Major Arcana, so there is absolutely no chance we are going to cover everything. So what we're planning on doing is we've chosen three fandoms from the 7 that we're doing for each card, and we're going to go over the meanings of the tarot through those 3 characters on each card. We'll get to the first 11, we'll take a little break for some Q&A, we'll try to finish up the rest of them. If we can't, we will be in the hallway outside after the panel. If you want to ask us any other questions or ask us about a particular character that we didn't go over or something like that. So how many people here are familiar with tarot at all? Okay, good. So you guys have already got a good primer. About half of you have already got a good primer on what this is all about. My name is Meredith. I am a master's student in history, and I've also been exploring tarot and other as part of my religious beliefs for the last couple of years.
I'm Chris. I'm an English teacher, lifelong pagan, and tarot has been in and out. It's an important part of my life, most of it.
Yeah. And so when I first started getting into tarot, all the books were very esoteric. They were very hard for me to grasp at the beginning, and as a result, we had a conversation at one point about how, it'd be really fun if we had like a Buffy tarot deck. That'd be really cool because you'd really remember what the cards mean. And we're like, we couldn't make that deck, but we could write a book about it. And so this is kind of the precursor to the book. So we're about halfway done with it, and hopefully we'll be publishing it later this year. So
yeah. So just, I figure most of you are familiar with tarot, but just as an overview, it's a way of understanding certain archetypes in life. We use for crafting stories, for personal growth, or for spiritual practices. We make no judgments on which one you choose. And we found one of the easiest ways to understand the tarot is start associating them with archetypes in your own life. And one of the easiest ways for that is pop culture, because it's readily accessible and it helps other people understand meanings as well. So we're going to try and cover all 22 of the Major Arcana. We certainly do not have time for minors right now. But we have that. When we get the book published, it'll all be in there. So what we're going to do is our structure has, we picked 7 different fandoms to pull from. And we're going to cover 3 for each card. The fandoms we pulled from were the 8 Harry Potter movies, not the books, because the goal was to try and keep this as accessible as possible, and movies have a wider knowledge varying to the books.
to be fair, I did. I was the one who wrote most of the Harry Potter parts, and I did pull from the books a little bit, even though he told me not to, so I do what I want.
Well, we try for movies. Star Trek, mainly focusing on the original series, Next Generation, DS9, and the movies. The TV shows of Joss Whedon, Buffy Angel, Firefly, and Dollhouse. The major DC movies for the last few years. The J.J. Abrams TV shows of Lost, Alias, and Fringe. The show Once Upon a Time and Babylon 5, which is probably the most esoteric out there, but kind of offers a way to see it in context with not something you have pre-existing beliefs on. And as you can see with some of these, it's kind of hard to pull just one TV show and get a full set. That's why we had, like with Joss Whedon, pull from Firefly and Dollhouse, which are a little more obscure, but it's the only way we could get all 78 cards done.
Yeah, I fully wish that I could do like a Lucifer deck. I would love to do a deck for that, but there's literally no way there's enough characters in that to do all 78 cards. I could maybe do the Major Arcana, and that's it. So,
okay. So and please tell us if we're rushing a little too much, but we're going to try and get through as much as possible here. So the first card in the Major Arcana for most decks is the Fool. It's a symbol of new beginnings, of immaturity, of someone who's just starting out on life, and all the mistakes that come with that. And for the three in particular, the first one we're going to go over for Star Trek is Wesley Crusher, who is quite foolish at times, nearly blowing up the ship on several occasions. It's his mom trapped in a parallel universe. But like the Fool, he has the potential to become something much better, at least so they say. We never actually got to see that. But we'll trust the writers that they know what they're talking about.
yeah. For Buffy, we chose Xander. Typically, the Fool is probably going to be mostly the main character of a series because you're going to see a lot of growth for that character. But at the same time, Buffy already knows who she is at the beginning of the series. Doesn't really work. Xander is a complete unknown. He has no idea what his potential is as a character. And he messes up a lot during the course of the series. The first season, he, randomly gets possessed by a hyena spirit. There's a lot of things that go wrong for this character. They consider him the Zeppo. He's the unnecessary one. He doesn't have any magic powers. He doesn't have any calling. But he still manages somehow to reach a potential that no one else in the show really, measures up to in many ways, because he didn't have to save the world. He didn't have to, find Willow and stop her from destroying the world. He didn't have to do it. He did it anyway. So he reaches his potential as a character in that way. And
something else we're going to do is, when we started this, we also looked at a lot of, there are fandom decks out there, but they tend to pull sometimes from images and shoehorn them in where they don't belong. And so the 8th one there on all these slides, that's one we found from a fandom deck that we didn't feel made any sense.
Yeah, in this case, we saw a lot of times that the Doctor Who would pick the Doctor as the Fool. I don't really understand what their version of the Fool is in this case, because he's kind of at the end of his journey. He knows who he is as a person. I guess he has potential to make good decisions or bad decisions, but when it really comes down to it, there's no youth represented by the Doctor. Every person who meets him talks about how old he seems and how tired he is. And it's just not really a good choice for that card, which is something to really keep in mind if you want to if you're trying to understand the deck yourself, or if you're trying to make your own deck based on fandom characters that you like. You really have to look at the card first and then see what character fits, not try to shoehorn in a main character into certain roles.
The Magician is another card. Is the next card in the deck. This is someone who may still have some of the naivete of the Fool, but has learned much on his way, has power, but not necessarily wisdom. And again, we kind of picked, sorry for starting off in Star Trek again, there was a kind of a shuffling of these things. Yeah. But for that, you certainly see Q as being the example of the Magician. All power, all bravado, all control, but absolutely none of the wisdom that should go along with that kind of power. He's a giant man-child who brings mariachi bands onto the deck.
We all love him. He's my favorite character, but yeah, he's not very mature.
If we go to J.J. Abrams one, for those of you familiar with Fringe, you have Dr. Walter Bishop, a guy whose catchphrase is, "Excellent, let's make some LSD." He's certainly a mad scientist who can bend the rules of physics, of biology, of chemistry, do all sorts of crazy things, but he never stops to ask, should I be doing this?
And for Once Upon a Time is kind of a so far so obvious choice, Merlin. He is the magician. But at the same time, he's not the magician because he wields ultimate power, but because he's often very foolish in the way he chooses to wield that power. He does not see the future. He's supposed to be able to see the future, and yet he continuously makes bad decisions. He allows bad characters to become more powerful as a result of his manipulations. So he ends up bringing in some of the ultimate evil in the show as a result of that. All right, the High Priestess is the next card. So the Major Arcana of the High Priestess is one of the main female roles that is there. She is not necessarily seeking control. She has it. She's got the power. She understands the world, but she doesn't always understand the world the way other people do. As a result, we ended up choosing, for Harry Potter, Luna Lovegood. She is definitely a strong character, but she's not strong in an in-your-face kind of way. She understands the world, and she is very sure she knows what's going on in the world, even if no one else believes that she believes. And she has a lot of strength as a result of that. I know that it wasn't in books, but I do really, really appreciate the role that she takes on in the movies, in which she is, in the final film, is the one who stops Harry and is like, look, you need to listen to me because I know what's going on here and I need you to follow me. And so she's definitely a leader in the show.
Slightly not the kind of deeper spiritual wisdom, but in the DC movies, we would point to Amanda Waller. This is a woman who maybe doesn't have esoteric knowledge, but has the knowledge of how to push everyone's buttons, the deeper psychological knowledge of what motivates people, what she can do to push them, and what she can do to get them to do what she wants.
Yeah, I think one of the things we wrote about in the book is that that the high priestess archetype is very much the bitch. She is. she and we don't mean that in a negative way. Like she's like this badass kind of person who just can order people around and doesn't take no for an answer, and that's definitely Amanda Waller.
And for the slightly more obscure, in Babylon 5, we see this archetype in the character of Delenn, someone who is highly spiritual, someone who understands how the world works and understands what her role in it is and what other people's roles need to be, and is willing to motivate them, not necessarily through force, but through that deeper wisdom. And then we turn to the Empress, who is the other major female character. This is more of the passive side of feminine nature. This is the character of the mother, but it can also be someone who is more sensual, more concerned with the physical and this level of reality as opposed to the wisdom of the esoteric. Here we see in Star Trek the character of Carol Marcus from Star Trek II, both a mother herself, but also someone who can create whole worlds in a very Mother Earth kind of way. But she also lacks the wisdom to ask, should I let my son make this thing so unstable that it blows up? Or should I have slept with Jim Kirk?
That would have been a great idea. I don't know. I mean, this is our third panel this week, so we are tongue-tied like crazy. Oh my god, I'm so exhausted. For Buffy, we chose Tara. She is definitely the sort of Mother Earth character for this show. She has a much stronger connection to magic than anybody else in the show does, and it also has a much stronger understanding of what magic should and should not be used for. And that wisdom allows her to see things in a much clearer way than many of the other characters
But in a more motherly and emotional way.
Yeah, exactly. She also fulfills the role of she's not a mother, but she fulfills the role of a motherly character throughout a good portion of the series that she's in. Especially since by that time we've lost one of the other female figures in the show, and so as a result, she steps in with Dawn, she steps in with Buffy, she steps in with everyone to give them a shoulder to cry on and advice. And that makes her definitely a mother figure for the show. Also, obviously, a good mother figure for Once Upon a Time would be Snow White. She is the ultimate mother figure for this show. Even if she didn't raise her own child, she still is definitely the one that the city turns to. When Storybrooke needs a new mayor, they go right to her. She's the leader. She doesn't want the job, but she's going to do her best. And she's also just a very loving figure. Even not knowing who Emma is, she still automatically treats her as if she's her best friend and someone who needs a home. And that's the Empress.
On the flip side of that, we have the major male archetypes. First one being the Emperor, who is in a lot of ways the leader, the man's man, and the badass who takes control. And in Star Trek, if you're going to look for that, it's Jim Kirk. It's the guy who's always in charge, the guy who is always put on with all the responsibility put onto him. And while the show wavered back and forth between well writing, which showed him to have this internal dialogue of I'm not sure I can handle this, this is a lot of responsibility, to really bad writing, like Spock's brain, but he's always the leader figure that every character afterwards is judged by. If we turn to the J.J. Abrams universe, we see the character of
Jack
Bristow, Sydney's father.
Favorite character.
Yeah, who is also the person who always takes charge, who always wants to be the one in control, even that means manipulating other characters, because he believes he knows what is best and he's the one who should be in charge.
Yeah. And for this, we were looking through some of the fandom cards, and for some reason someone had chosen Fox Mulder from the X-Files as a good option for this card, which makes absolutely no sense. This is the, square-jawed, responsible hero archetype, and for all of his many, good qualities in the show, it really comes down to he's a mess. He is not a leader. He's intelligent, but he's not actually wise. He does foolish things all the time throughout the series. And I mean, basically, he's just a porn addict with PTSD. That's basically who he is. And it works for him in the context of the show. You have to be that kind of irresponsible person to be believing in conspiracy theories and chasing them around the world. But he's definitely not the Emperor.
The other major mayor archetype is the Hierophant, who is more the symbol of the power of organization, not necessarily someone who you want to follow, but just someone who you should follow.
Yeah, basically that would be like, have any of you ever read Dilbert, the comic? Yeah. He's the pointy-haired boss. He is the boss, but not because he necessarily should be the boss. He just, happens to be the one in charge. In this case, the best example of this from Harry Potter would be Cornelius Fudge. He's not really got any redeeming qualities as a leader. He makes really bad decisions. He completely denies that Voldemort is back until things go so wrong that he has to admit that he made a mistake. But up until that point, everyone just follows along. They're like, well, he's the Minister for Magic. We've got to follow him. That's the very negative implication of this card.
And in DC, we see this from Suicide Squad, the character of Rick Flag, put in charge of Suicide Squad, but none of them like him. Deadshot points out he's a terrible motivational speaker. They'd all shoot him if they could, but they can't. And so they have to follow him. But it's his rank and his job, not his personality, that causes them to follow him.
And it's good to remember, especially with these cards, is that there are positive and negative aspects to every single one of them. And in this case, I have a lot of trouble with the Hierophant card. It's just not one that I really get. But if you go to the Joss Whedon universe, there is one very positive view of this card, and that would be Shepherd Book from Firefly. He is a preacher who's in charge. He's a leader, but because of his position in the world, but he actually does have good qualities. Like the fact that he is a leader is based on the fact that people trust him, and he can inspire people. So the Hierophant doesn't necessarily have to be a negative card. I tend to put that into the card myself when I'm doing a reading and I pull the Hierophant. I'm like, oh God, this is not going to be a good day. This is not going to be fun. But weirdly enough, I did pull it for my yearly reading this year, and it was the same month. My yearly reading, it was the same month that I also got accepted to grad school. So I mean, I guess it was a good thing in that case. All right, so this case, do not throw rotten vegetables at me for this card, okay? So the Lover's card is not necessarily about romance. But speaking of romance, we're both single, ladies. So anyway, so the reason I don't want you to throw rotten vegetables at me is because for my Harry Potter card, I chose Snape and Lily. This card is not about romance. It is about codependence. It is about people who are not necessarily going to, there are a lot of negative aspects to it, where you are basically, you're basically having to make a choice. In this case, you have Snape, who has to make a choice between the Death Eaters and Lily, and he makes the wrong choice. He could have stayed friends with her and maintained a good relationship. Instead, he went down the darker path. With Harry, he could have made the choice to be kind to the child of his former love, but instead he chose to be cruel to him instead. So when you have the Lover's card, it is about making a choice, which you can definitely see on the Rider-Waite deck here. There's somebody presiding over this relationship. It's not necessarily just about physical interaction or lust or romance. If you do want a card that represents that would be the Two of Cups. So.
In the Joss Whedon universe, the obvious example would be Buffy and Angel, who, while romantically involved, both make a choice to not continue with the relationship because they know it is both unhealthy for them. And maybe someday, when Buffy is finished baking, I believe the metaphor was, she'll make that choice, but
she's not cookies yet.
No. But it is not helpful at this moment, and they choose to take a step back.
And for this particular one, I was so heartbroken by this card when they chose it, the Doctor and Rose. I think most Doctor Who fans shipped this couple. Nobody had a problem with this couple necessarily in the show, but there was no choice involved in this. they got ripped apart from each other, and that's not a good representation of this card. It's not two people making a choice to end their relationship because it's healthier for them. It's not two people choosing to move forward in their relationship because it's healthier. It's just, that's the way the universe works. Sometimes you're going to get ripped away from each other. It's not a good card for this. All right, the Chariot. This one's a pretty obvious metaphor. It's about moving forward. It's about, being
balancing the forces in your
and
life.
also being dragged forward by opposing forces in some cases. You don't necessarily have a choice in what you're doing. For Harry Potter, we chose the flying car, which doesn't really give anybody a choice. It just kind of does what it wants to do. It does get them to Hogwarts, but in the most dangerous way it possibly can. And then it runs off into the woods and becomes, it becomes rabid. I don't know what it does, but it has a dark side to it, let's just say. It does end up saving Harry and Ron, so I guess kudos to it, but it definitely is not it's not a friendly thing, but it definitely moves you forward on your story.
In Star Trek, we look, ironically, at the one thing that doesn't move in the entire Star Trek universe, Deep Space Nine, but more because it is this contradiction of forces. It's a Cardassian station run by the Federation. It has the Bajorans and the Federations trying to balance things. It's at this nexus between the Alpha and Gamma quadrants. It's trying to balance all of these forces, which amazingly they do, but everything is pulling at them at every moment. And for Babylon 5, we chose the obvious ship, the White Star, which again shows a balance of things. It was a mix of Minbari and Vorlon technology. It's run by humans. It's, again, balancing all the forces, and it is the thing that it is the fleet that in the end shows that the two opposing forces in the universe are wrong to make you choose between them, and you have to go your own way.
I like this card.
Yeah. Most stereotypical heroes will fall into the Emperor, and most stereotypical heroines fall into strength. This is the feminine hero. This is the choosing to use not just raw power, but also your emotions to better the world, to bring about something better. And the Weight Rider deck is showing that a woman can calm even the strongest animal around. And in DC, we see this with Wonder Woman's all too obvious choice, but especially with Gal Gadot's interpretation, who, she blows up Ares, but it's only after she realizes what she needs to be doing in life. It's not a physical victory, it's an emotional one for her.
For Once Upon a Time with Emma, she's obviously the main heroine of the TV show, but also she's not a person who's very in touch with her emotions when the show starts. She is very closed off from everything. It takes her understanding of that she can bring her walls down and still be strong for her to really become a hero. At the end of season 1, that's what it takes for her to save her son and to save the entire city. And throughout the series, it is her realization that love is a strength that allows her to be the savior.
And for Babylon 5, we pulled the character Sunbanba, who is very much the one who actually is in control of the station. She runs the day-to-day operations, she's the one to know, and she's the one who will make the sacrifice sometimes that nobody else will. If the Banba can't do it, then nobody can. Then we turn to the Hermit, who is everything the Magician is not, whereas the Magician has this very straightforward power and he likes to display it. The Hermit has the wisdom and the power and chooses not to display it. He keeps to himself, and he's the one you go out to seek not how to control the world, but how to understand it. In DC, Christian Bale's Batman is very much like this. He constantly retreats from the world, and that is where he learns what his next step has to be. Both in running away in the first movie, and then retreating back into Wayne Manor in the third one, and then being in the pit, is his retreat from the world where he finds true inner wisdom that allows him to move forward.
And our next choice is not one that makes a lot of sense for the Hermit card initially, because he owns a nightclub. That doesn't sound like somebody who would be a hermit at all. But Lorne is definitely a hermit. He's an outcast from his own people. He chose to follow a path all of his own because he didn't believe in what his race stood for. So he came to Earth and became a nightclub owner to dispense wisdom to people. And that's very much what the Hermit is. He is making a choice to remove himself from the world that he knows so that he can be more beneficial to people.
And in J.J. Abrams' works, we see Desmond King, Lost, guy who spends time in solitary confinement, spends time in a monastery, spends time in a bunker all by himself. He is very much alone, and from this, he is the one who you always go to for wisdom. He is the one who sees the truth in the last season, that they're all stuck in this nexus and they have to move forward, and he is the one who brings it out of it because he spent time by himself and found that inner wisdom.
And our next card is the Wheel of Fortune. This one is a pretty obvious, also, it is about movement. But at the same time, it's about unstoppable movement. You're either on the upswing and everything is great, or you're being ground beneath the wheel and everything sucks. And it's completely outside of your control. You can't tell what's going to happen next. For Harry Potter, and mostly, this card is going to direct you towards very big things. For Harry Potter, that's going to be the Sorting Hat, which I just see a Sorting Hat walked in. So there you go. It's perfect timing. So the Sorting Hat puts you on a path. Who thought that it was a good idea to separate children at age 11 and make them view each other as enemies? I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. I guess it's British boarding school for you. But it puts you into one of 4 houses, and that house dictates who you spend time with. Basically, nature versus nurture. If you go to Hufflepuff, you're probably going to stay a Hufflepuff the rest of your life. If you go to Slytherin, like me, you're probably going to be judged as a Slytherin, and you're going to be impacted by that for the rest of your life. So it gives you a start in life, but it also restricts your choices in life.
And in Star Trek, we see that this being the Kobayashi Maru test. This is the test that every cadet at Starfleet Academy is given to see how well they deal with situations where there's no way to figure out a solution. There's no way to get out of it. It's a no-win scenario, and it's seeing what their character is at that lowest moment. And this it's implied, is what directs them a lot of their life. This is clearly the one guy who figured out the solution to it is the one who gets promoted up the ranks rather quickly. But it also is a place that takes all of them in a whirlwind of not knowing what's going on and how am I going to deal with this. Then we turn to J.J. Abrams. There we see the best example of Wheel of Fortune is the floating red Rambaldi ball. The Mueller device, that's what it was called. Every time that shows up in the show, it's going to mean that every character's life is about to be torn upside down because wacky things are about to happen. And so there we see that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break because we know
We just covered a lot of stuff.
and we know we may not have time to get to the end, so we wanted to get the Q&A out of the way. So any questions right up in the purple?
Yes.
Okay, this might be a weird question, but I named the character after this tarot card, and I've been going to a bunch of tarot events and asking him this question. What info do you have on the Seven of Swords?
We haven't actually gotten to that one yet in the book. But the book we're writing. So, Seven of Swords. You know what? Come to us after the panel if you're able to, and we'll go over and talk more about that one with you, because we are still delving into that section of the tarot ourselves.
Just to note, like I said, I'm basing a character off of that.
That's
His
cool.
name
Yeah.
is, first of all, there are 1,000 registered people in America with the first name of Seven, as in Evan with an S.
Like 7 of 9.
Yeah, no, or just like Evan. Hey, it's my friend Evan, his dad an S. So his name is Seven Branson Cabal.
That's cool. Yeah, definitely. We can talk about it after the panel if you have some time. We just don't want to go into that.
I figured no one else had a specific Arcana, minor Arcana they can find, but maybe they do.
So swords are a lot about conflict. I'd have to look at seven to really refresh my memory of what that card is, because we're basing the book on like 10 other sources on the cards. So
Yeah.
we can go over that with you later. Yeah.
The first source that I heard, not like a bunch of just one, is that one side is deception, but the other side is a change of heart, basically.
It can be. I'm just looking over our notes here. This is, we have, like in Once Upon a Time when Zozo tricks Rumple into becoming the Dark One. In Star Trek, it's more the, in the Pale Moonlight, which Cisco portrays all of his principles to save the Federation by getting the Romulans to fall in. It's a sword about you're convincing yourself you're doing something good, but not necessarily through the most ethical means.
Yeah.
So deception definitely is part of that. Yeah. Yes.
Are you drawing at all from like Battlestar Galactica? Like would Starbuck be a good strength, or is she a little more ethereal and
if-
other places?
I'd say I don't think you've watched.
No.
that. Okay.
The new Battlestar.
Yeah, the new Battlestar. I'd say Starbuck, yeah, probably would fit the strength card to some degree. I'm not certain if I was doing a deck, I would put her there necessarily. I might put her in one of the court cards more. Yeah, she's got a little more depth to it than just the strength card. But yeah, we're not doing Battlestar because I'm not as I never actually finished the series. I heard what the ending was, and I got so like, gosh, no, I'm done. I'm not even gonna bother. I just kind of threw up my hands and like gave my dad all my DVDs. But but yeah, so that was not one of the ones we decided to work on. I don't think there's actually enough characters necessarily to do a full deck, so we kind of shelved that idea. So maybe there is, and I welcome anyone else to do it, maybe, but I'm not familiar enough.
In the order she had
Yeah.
first.
I don't even think that the major and minor belong together. It's like, can you just do a reading with the major or the minor? Because it doesn't,
can.
it seems
You can.
like it's like two things that have been squashed together and that doesn't really belong
I
together.
think in most interpretations, you'd say that one is the major arcana is for more life-changing events, more stronger things, and the minor arcana is a little more detail-oriented, more day-to-day. And when you do them together, you're looking at, okay, was this focusing today on the more day-to-day operations, or is this, one of those moments where my life is about to hit some major events?
Right.
And
Like
that's,
I said, when I was doing my year reading this year, I got the Hierophant for last month, and last month was when I got my acceptance to grad school. That's a major life change. It had nothing to do with small day-to-day things. I had a sweeping thing. So yeah, there's a difference in what they cover, basically.
sorry, Black, I think you're next.
So, do you have any concerns with your fandoms that aren't complete yet?
No, all our fandoms are complete. All the ones we chose. Oh, you mean shows that aren't finished?
Yeah, like
Okay.
like in the DC universe. I mean, you had brought up Wonder Woman as an example there. Are you concerned at all, like if a new movie comes out and it kind of goes down? I mean, if we haven't seen, especially DC movies, go down some weird paths.
Yeah,
True.
we have a whole preface on this on why we basically just took the movies that Nolan and Snyder were directing or directly producing, because about halfway through Justice League, Warner Brothers clearly said, no, we want to try and make our whole thing into Marvel. And
So, which
that's
kinda-
where we cut it off.
That
Because,
kind of prevents, it caps the amount of depth in the cards, yeah.
purple.
Yeah, do you guys have like I know you're writing a book, but do you maybe have a current source that maybe someone can look to if they want to kind of learn about this in detail?
absolutely.
We have several books. I found actually the most useful is Waite's original text on the
You
tarot.
can get that online for free, which is great, so that's nice.
Also, I have books here.
Some of them I know
Yeah.
you saw this one.
Honestly, this is the most useful book we found. It's called Dictionary of the Tarot by Bill Butler. It has a Waite, it has Crowley, it has about 7 different interpretations, all summarized and codified here. The only problem is it went out of print in about the 1980s, and so I think the last time I saw it on Amazon it was up for $150.
Yeah,
But
so there are a handful of good, if you want a nice one that I really do enjoy that is kind of easy to understand, because a book called Kitchen Table Tarot that's available on Amazon. That's not one of the sources we're using for this book in particular, because it's more of it's kind of a surface level, entry level book, but it's really enjoyable to read, and I feel like she has a really good grasp of the cards, so.
Or also good for just an introductory WTF Tarot.
Yeah, that's a fun one too.
I don't
yes.
always agree with their interpretations, but it's a good, easy way to ease into it.
Which, yeah, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
That's like a video game example for reason for I know the title is the Persona series.
I haven't, yeah, I don't think we've played that one. Honestly, I'm not a big video game player, honestly, at this point,
They
so.
mention the tarot explicitly, and they explicitly like link all of their characters to the card.
That is interesting, I'll have to take a look at that then, yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping to sell a publisher and saying like, you can buy ours, and then you can have other people do other things. And
People could write their own books or make their own decks or
Yeah,
something.
like the best friend who sort of kickstarts the adventure is the chariot.
No,
At
that's
least
cool.
in the fifth book.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, that's kind of what the chariot does.
and have,
How do you feel that pop culture treats the tarot deck? I feel
terribly.
Yeah, no. I think one of my most hated things is in a TV show when somebody's doing a tarot reading and they get the death card and they're like, oh, I know, someone I know is going to die. And I'm like, that's not what that card means.
No, it's the tower card.
Pull the tower, if that were that. Yeah. Or, they get the devil and they're like, ooh, that's scary. I'm like, that's not what that means either. Yeah, the tarot is not understood well in pop culture at all for the most part.
Last question before we go on.
Yeah, I did have one more question. I noticed that with the, I think it was the magician card for Harry Potter, you had Tom Riddle, I think. I wasn't really quite getting, when you were explaining the card, how it relates to him.
So I think we kind of neglected. So like I said, the cards have both positive and negative connotations. So what you're going to see with them is that a lot of times when people shuffle the decks, they will get a reversed card. So with the magician, the reversed card is very much about deception and
Using your power for personal gain.
Using your power for personal gain. Also about, promising things that you can't deliver, that kind of thing. And that's exactly Tom Riddle is more of the negative implication of that card. So so we kind of glossed over that because we didn't have time to go into the negative implications as much. But yeah, that's going to be the negative implication.
Okay, so we'll try and have a Q&A at the end as well. But
Or in the hallway afterwards.
yeah. Okay, next comes up is justice. This is not so much about punishment, but about the concept of balancing debts, balancing forces, that everyone should get what they deserve. But it does kind of lend itself into that criminal way of thinking of justice. And thus we turn to, in Star Trek, Odo, a character who cares about what is right and wrong and doesn't care who's in charge. He cares about doing what he conceives of as the proper order of things. And to the point where he gives up what he wants personally to be with Kira to go and help his people restore order at the end. And in DC, we see this in Commissioner Gordon, specifically from the Nolan movies. A man who sacrifices his whole family, his whole life to see the city he loves brought back into the right order, and is willing to sometimes even compromise his own personal values to do that.
And for Once Upon a Time, Justice, Robin Hood. That's just an easy one. Take from the rich, give to the poor, go after the corrupt, basically. And that's very much the character in Once Upon a Time. Not all versions of Robin Hood have been depicted that way, but this is a character who wants to do the right thing. He tries to go straight, but when he can't make things work there, he's like, well, if I'm going to have to, I'm going to go out and I'm going to rob the place. I'm going to make things right. And making things right is not always about following the rule of law, basically.
Next up,
Hangman. This is a card that's pretty misunderstood, mostly because it's a really dark-looking card. You got this guy who's just hanging upside down from his feet, but at the same time, he looks pretty calm about it. He doesn't look like he's really upset about hanging upside down, and that's because this card is about, you're going to go through suffering, but you're going to learn something from it, and therefore you're going to come out better on the other end. It's like you're going to suffer, but you're going to like it. For this card, this would definitely be Harry Potter. So he goes through suffering from as early on as he can remember. He has had everything go wrong in his life that could possibly go wrong. But as a result, he's learned to be compassionate. He's learned to be strong. He's learned to persevere. And as a result, those are the qualities that he needs in order to save the world.
In DC, we see this with the Harry Cavill interpretation of Superman, who's not necessarily the dumb blue Boy Scout of comic books, but a figure who suffers a lot. He's forced to have to kill someone when he doesn't want to. He's forced to see his failures when Congress blows up. He's driven out from the world. But from this, he achieves a better understanding that this is his world, that this is what he's fighting for, and it's worth giving his life for. And in Babylon 5, if you're familiar with the show, we see this mostly in the character of Shakar, who suffers over and over and over again to the point where he's given numerous lashes, has his eye ripped out, has his planet destroyed, but from this rises out as a spiritual leader that can lead the Interstellar Alliance to something much greater than itself. Then we get to the Death card, probably the most misunderstood card in the entire tarot, because the Death card isn't about people dying, it's about clearing away the old so that the new can exist. In economics, it's called creative destruction. It's like a slash and burn tactic for farming. You get rid of everything that's there, and it fertilizes the ground, and something new can come out of it. In Star Trek, we see this in the Genesis device. It takes, theoretically, a dead planet and creates a life-giving source. Granted, it doesn't work in the end, but it does bring Spock back, so it still has that element of taking something old and giving us something new.
And in the Joss Whedon universe, we have the Operative. He kills a lot of people, so you couldn't necessarily say that he represents just death, but he also represents a change in viewpoint, because he is completely without remorse. He doesn't care about the why, he just cares about doing what he's ordered to do, until he realizes that everything he's known is wrong. And it's at that moment that he changes completely. He becomes a completely different person. And in fact, he says at the end of Serenity that I'm gone. I no longer exist. The person that worked for the Alliance is no longer here. And that's really what the Death card is about. It's about a rebirth as a person. And also, one of the worst cards we saw also was when a Doctor Who deck. The Master, there's no rebirth there. He dies a lot, granted, in the series over and over again. But
he's
he never.
The same jerk every time.
Yeah, he's got the same problems every single time he's reborn. He's still crazy. He's still trying to destroy the world, more or less, and he's completely still obsessed with the Doctor and defeating him. So there's no growth in that character, and there's no rebirth.
Then we have Temperance, which again is about this constant symbol in a lot of spirituality is about balancing the forces, and this one is more of an internal balancing, whereas Justice is more of an external balancing. Star Trek, the most obvious example of that would be Spock, who balances his human side and his Vulcan side, and reaches a calm that goes beyond even what most Vulcans have, in like his understanding in Star Trek 6, that logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. In Babylon 5, we have also the Ranger Marcus Cole, a man who's been thrown from post to post all his life and is looking for that balance, but never truly finds it. And that's we see in the reverse of someone who doesn't quite achieve that, even though he seeks it.
And the worst card we found for this was Angelus, an angel, for some reason, in Buffy. There's nothing temperate about that character. I think the idea they had was that Angel and Angelus are two sides of a coin, but at the same time, they don't balance each other out. They're both extremes on either end. You have Angelus, who's a complete psychopath, and has no redeeming qualities, and then you have Angel, who is just a brooding, individual who has no middle ground either. So with Temperance, you need to find a character that has a middle ground to find a good representation. If you look at a character who has just completely extreme emotions on either side, that's not going to be a good representation. And the Devil. There's good reasons for that. Now, you might necessarily think, Dolores Umbridge is the Devil, but when it comes to, we all hate her. I've seen a lot of Dolores Umbridges this weekend too, and I'm like, I am disturbed every time I see her here. So, the Devil is a card that is not really a symbol of evil, though, so keep that in mind. It's a card of temptation, basically. And for Dolores Umbridge, that is a temptation that is about wanting to believe that things are good. She wants to believe, that she can just manipulate the world into what she wants it to be. And she does that through, we're trying to brainwash children. She does that through trying to convince everyone that the government is on their side. She tries to sell people, basically, a load of bullcrap and make them believe that it's true. And it's tempting, because you want to believe everything is good. So it would be nice to think that the nice old woman in the fuzzy pink sweater that's telling you that the world is fine is correct. But she's definitely not. You can't trust that person.
In Star Trek, we have Caldecott, who again is unspeakably evil. He's Space Hitler. But what makes him the devil is not all his evil acts. It's that, for anyone who watched the show when it first came out, we all kind of were tempted by him. We all wanted him to be better. We all wanted him to admit, I was wrong, I see that now, and I will work to be better. And it wasn't until like season 5 we realized, there's no hope for him.
Yeah,
Space Hitler is Space Hitler.
Space Hitler does not have a redemptive arc.
For DC, probably the most controversial pick we have for the entire book, we picked Joss Whedon.
Not even a character.
A guy we praise in other aspects, but for DC, we thought that, previously called the God of the Nerds is going to come in here. Yeah, Zack Snyder had to leave Justice League because of personal reasons. His daughter committed suicide and he needed to take some time off. We thought Joss would done good job with so many TV shows. The first Avengers was great. Ultron, we wanted to blame the studio for being responsible for that. But he comes in and he handed us possibly a movie worse than Green Lantern. And he actively did it by filming the mustache stuff and the crazy Romanian family I didn't really care about. And he tempted us to think he was going to give us a good movie, and no, he did not.
He lied. And now this one's the one that's always bad. The Tower. If you get this...
There's positive sides to every card, but the Tower there's only a very little positive side. The Tower is, your life is about to be completely thrown into upheaval. If you can recover from that, great. But your house is burned down, your bank account's cleared out, and you have no idea where to go. And that's obviously in Star Trek, the Borg. The Borg show up, and everything's just hit the fan. People are going to die. It's not going to be a happy time. There's going to be no grand, playing poker that night.
Yeah.
For Babylon 5, we have the Shadows. This is a race that literally says our mantra is spreading chaos. We love chaos. We want everyone to be in wars, so they'll be better. It might actually have a point that evolution works that way, but trying to kill people by the billions to force evolution, probably not the best idea.
And finding a bad example with this card is actually kind of difficult because, to be fair, most people understand that this is a bad card. They're not picking bad things for this card. But
we did
find one, which was the Avengers Tower. I don't know what they were thinking with that particular selection. It is a tower, and that is the problem. A lot of people, when they are looking at it, they look for the obvious choice for a card. They look for, devil card. Well, let's pick Lucifer Morningstar. That'll be great because he's the devil. That's going to work just great. But at the same time, you're not looking at the deeper meaning of the card for that. And, there's no positive way to view the tower, whereas there are many positives to the Avengers Tower card. And when you're creating a deck, it's tempting to go with those obvious choices because it's really easy. And you're like, okay, now I've got a cool deck and I can read tarot cards using my favorite pop culture references and it's great. But that's not really going to give you a good understanding of the card.
Now we get into the end part of the Major Arcana, which is probably the most difficult to understand.
I think when we got to these cards, we were just like, oh no, I don't want to have to understand what the star means. I don't want to do this. But finally, we delved into enough content that we were able to. This is actually, you understand this card better than I do, so I'm going to let you go into that one.
The star is more of a symbol of hope. It's a symbol that you start on this journey to better yourself, and everything's gotten terrible at the tower. But now there is a symbol that you can look towards this star, you can see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You're certainly not done with your journey yet, but you can see that there is an end, and you will be better for it.
Yeah. And for Harry Potter, we chose Limbo. After Harry dies, he is taken to King's Cross Station, and he's given a choice. He can go back to his own world and see what happens there, or he can move on and be happy with the family that he has that's already passed on. And while he's in Limbo, he's given that moment of things are going to get better, whichever way you choose, but you just have to make a choice.
In DC, we chose Superman's first flight in Man of Steel, because that is the moment where you know that this is the guy who's going to be the hero. It's the first truly stirring moment of the film, where we all kind of just wanted to, we all felt our skin tingle, music rises up, you see him just smiling. He has been a little morose for the first, third film, justifiably so, but this is the first time you really see him embrace who he is, and we know that we haven't gotten to the point where, he's walking down the street and rips open his shirt showing the yes, but we know that moment's coming from just that.
Yeah. And for Angel viewers, you probably know what the Shanshu prophecy is. And for this particular case, it might seem like an odd choice because it's it's about dying instead of going on and living. Because the Shanshu prophecy was going to grant mortality and a soul to some chosen vampire. But at the same time, it's about transformation. That's what the star is. It's about the next step in your life and being transformed from a soulless vampire into a mortal who is able to, basically save the world. That is going to, that's going to be, the next step in your life, and that's what the star is about.
Then the moon, with that weird lobster at the bottom.
I don't know about the lobster. The lobster's weird, and I've gotten into so many arguments in the tarot group I'm in online about whether or not that's a lobster or a crawdad or whatever, and nobody can come up with a good answer for it. So people have said scorpion too, but I don't see it. It's definitely got a lobster tail.
Wade calls it a crayfish when he was coming up with it.
And I grew up in the South. That's not a crayfish. I don't know what.
But the moon is a symbol of looking at your darker side, the side that you try and hide from yourself, the side that you don't often look at. It's often a symbol of looking internally to find answers, but unlike the hermit who knows those answers and has found them by looking internally, the moon is about that process of going inside. And so probably best shown by showing people their opposite darker side. So Star Trek obviously is the mirror universe, and Spock with beard, and who still has all of the nobility of our regular Spock, but also a little more vicious, a little more calculating, and a little less successful, because if you watch DS9, you find out that even when he tried to bring about peace, it kind of degenerated. In Fringe, with J.J. Abrams, we had a whole universe also, again, that showed the darker side. And here we have Olivia, and I have video queued up, I don't have it ready. But
never mind. But it's one of my favorite lines from the entire show. He fell right into her vagina. That's one of the best lines of the entire show.
Unlike the Olivia of the regular universe, Olivia is conniving, deceitful, a little more risk-taking and go get them. But it shows best at the end of the fourth season when the two of them are talking how they both admire aspects of the other person that they don't have. They both see that they're capable of these other things and have both something to aspire to in finding the strengths of their darker side.
And every once upon a time, we see the Dark Swan. Literally, Emma Swan's dark side. But at the same time, she's not that different. She acts like she's different. She pretends to all of her family that she's gone dark. But in the end, she's only doing that so that she can save people. And so she is she's in touch with the darker side of what her desires are. And those desires do lead her to, trouble. She ends up creating another dark one. She ends up almost destroying her family. But at the same time, she's really only doing it because of her need to save people, which is inherently the light side of who she is as well. So the moon is really still connected to the light side of a person's personality.
It's finding the truth in that darkness.
Exactly.
And then after that journey into the darkness, we come out with the sun, which is the completion of your internal struggles and for you personally finding the truth for yourself. The next few cards will be spreading that out to the outside world, but in that moment of the sun, it is the personal joy of finding your way out of the darker side. In Star Trek, there's no better scene than that moment where Spock thinks he's killed Kirk, comes in, Kirk comes in, shows me he's alive, and Spock just grabs him, Jim! And you actually see him smile. It's the best thing he could have happen to him. And in the DC universe, we have at the end of Dark Knight Rises, where Commissioner Gordon sees the light has been restored, and I can now shine again the signal, and amongst all the other things that Bruce left to the city.
And he knows that Bruce isn't dead, which is a very positive thing for him. I've always seen the joy that the sun card is, it's about like kind of like bubbling up kind of joy you get like internally when you know something has happened that's good for you, or good for somebody that you love. That's what the sun card is about. And it's also about finding inner peace. So with Firefly, there is a wonderful moment in the show where it's, they show up. What does that make us? Big damn heroes, sir. And that is a moment for Mal that he has accepted his role as sort of the patriarch of this crew, and he has a family that he wants to protect. And even though he did not like Simon very much at the beginning, he's damn well part of his family, and you're not going to touch my family. And so he has sort of become the person that he wants to be at that moment, and he's no longer sort of the cynical person that he was before.
Then judgment comes, most people see the word judgment and they think they're being judged, whereas this is more tied to the meaning of the word in the book of Revelations, where at judgment, people rise from the grave. That not only you have made it through this journey and seen the sun, but now this light is spreading out to the world. That whatever wisdom you have accrued or something that has happened, it is spreading out to everyone. And now, the dead rise from the grave, all is just, all is good, all is pure, and we can all go forward. And one of the best scenes for this in J.J. Abrams' work is in Lost, at the very end, where we see not just only Jack Shepherd remember who he was, but this is the moment in the church where everyone has come together and they get to move on. In Babylon 5, this is more personal, with Captain Sheridan realizing that he not only has something worth dying for, he has something worth living for, and he can be the leader the universe needs to restore order and peace and a path forward in the Interstellar Alliance and beat both the Vorlons and the Shadows.
And this X-Files deck just kept giving us fits. Every time I looked at it, I was like, this is not the right card. This is not the right character for this. Somebody chose the cigarette smoking man for Judgment, which obviously, he's a very judgmental kind of guy, so I guess that's where they were getting this from. But he is not particularly representative of final joyous celebration. I guess we kind of all joyously celebrated when he took an ICBM to the face, but it's not really the same thing. That being said, as I said, there's a reverse version of this card, and if you look at the reverse side of the Judgment card, that's basically complete failure. You've been judged as lacking, and you've got to start over completely. Basically, if you believe in reincarnation, it's the idea that you failed in this life, and your next life you're going to have to relearn whatever lesson you were meant to learn. And in that case, I guess he might actually work there, because he definitely failed.
And finally, and I'm amazed we actually got through all of these in time, the world. The world is not just that everyone has, risen up, that everyone has revealed their truth, but that everything is as it should be. Everyone's won the lotto, there's peace in the world, there's good things, everything's good. And, it's usually the last scene of a show. Like with Star Trek Next Generation, Picard finally joined Poker King. And we actually see them starting to be the family we'd always hoped that they would be. Granted, I would like to have seen that show for 7 years, but...
Instead we get it at the end. Whatever.
For DC, it's Clark's realization. This is my world. You are my world. This is what I've been trying to get to this whole time, this realization, and I am going to save this world. And while it's a tragic scene, it is also a culmination of his character arc up to that point.
And in Once Upon a Time, one of my favorite parts of the last episode is that moment at the end where the book writes the ending. When good and evil both did the right thing, faith was restored and the final battle was won. And that's it. Yeah, but I do love the part that goes after that. That's it? No, the end? Of course not. That's not the end. I mean, maybe of this book, but it isn't the end to end. Now we have to see what's next. And it's an important thing to remember with tarot. Getting the world card doesn't mean that everything is over. It just means that that part of the story is over. And you're going to go on, you're going to have a new adventure. But you have reached the culmination of whatever your goal in life is. That's what the world card is giving you.
Okay, so before we start taking questions, we do have some online presence, which is where we're going to announce the book once we get it out and published. Other than that, questions?
Wait, one other thing I'm going to mention. I was going to have this ready when we actually came in for this, but I didn't have time this last week. If you follow us on our online presence, in a couple of weeks I'm going to be releasing a PDF that has basically a Major Arcana that you can print out yourself. It is the meme tarot. And I do aim eventually to do all 78 cards for this, and you'll be able to print them out, and I'll even include a link to a website I like where you can have them printed for yourself on tarot cards. And I think they're going to be a really fun idea. Basically, you're just going to see all your favorite memes, and they fit the cards.
To be fair, we had to shoehorn them in, so they don't always fit perfectly.
Yeah, there's a few, but the chariot is that this car can fit so much. It doesn't really fit necessarily, but it's funny, so that's all that matters.
And where do we download this again?
This is good. You're going to if you follow us on any of these social media, right here, Twitter, Tumblr, or Facebook, I will post a link to the PDF when I'm finished with it. I just haven't quite been able to work it around my school and work schedule to finish it yet, so.
Yes.
Can you go back to the pool card, because I missed it when I...
Yeah,
What?
the full cards.
Okay.
Yeah.